test case, isn't it? If New South Wales cannot lock down even with Delta spreading, would you say they've got it right up there? Maybe other states can follow suit?
Well, I think all states are trying to grapple with this situation, and I think we've been learning over the last 15 months now about how best to deal with this. I think New South Wales has been dealing with it pretty effectively previously. What comes through, though, from this is that the fundamental problem, which underpins all of this, is the issue of a proper quarantine system. And obviously our failure to have a swift vaccination of our population. I mean, until those two things are in place, then we're going to be dealing with these things frequently, and indeed the federal government has assumed that in its budget papers. They're imagining we're dealing with one of these every month.
The parameter originally was vulnerable Australians were the issue, hospitals not being overwhelmed. If we have at least the vulnerable Australians vaccinated, what happened to that conversation? Should we be having that again and saying, well, we can't keep locking down?
Well, we're going to be living in the land of the lockdown until we have vaccinated our population. That's the bottom line.
When did it shift to all the population, though? When was that?
Well, until we get some form of herd immunity, and whatever that number is, but it's a big number, and that's a number which is being discussed around the world, but it's certainly a lot more than 3%, which is where we're at the moment. We need to be getting our population vaccinated. That is completely clear. And until we do that, we're not in the game of having a conversation about how to move forward. And so long as we have so comparatively few people vaccinated relative to how the rest of the world is going, we're going to be in a position where we are living in the land of the lockdown. Because the only way you can tackle this is to do what New South Wales is doing now, what Victoria was doing a few weeks ago.
It seems though that means the setting is that the tolerance is 0 deaths, which isn't the policy in a whole swathe of other areas, including influenza, just for one.
I think the point is this, that so long as we have a population which doesn't have a large degree of vaccination, and in an objective sense, that's where we are at on this day. The vaccination program has been profoundly slow. As long as we are in that circumstance, then this disease is highly contagious. It can spread very quickly, and for people who have not been vaccinated, we know that the consequences for a significant number of people will be very dire. That's why we need to treat it in the way in which we are treating it. But the way to get to the other end of this is to properly vaccinate Australia. Now, that's not Gladys Berejiklian's problem, and that's not Daniel Andrews' problem. That is the job of Scott Morrison, and it's time he does his job.
Big conversation with the new Nationals leader this week, which I'm sure Labor's been talking about as well, around net zero. I mean, it's easy to say for Labor, this is the easy part of the argument because you've committed to it, but you haven't said how you get there.
Well, nor are we in government. We'll make it our path to our roadmap to net zero by 2050 very clear before we go to the next election, before we are next in a position of holding the levers of power. But the Liberal National Party are in government right now. Now, it's not even clear what their ambition is. I mean, they're not even committing to net zero emissions by 2050, despite the fact that that is really the proposition which underpins the Paris Accord to which they have signed Australia. And so we need a clarity of purpose from the government, which we don't have. Actually, what we've got is division. We see it with Warren Entsch's article today, and it's the kind of division which has been there, to be honest, since the day this government came to power back in 2000.
So the one that matters for both really is 2035. Labor's looking at what it will set there. You'll have something before the election.
We will articulate.
What will that be based on, though? I mean, are you willing to say, here's a target for 2035, it's more ambitious, it might cost the budget or the economy a little bit, but it'll be better in the long run? Is that the sort of conversation you're willing to have?
We're doing a lot of work on that now, and we will announce all of that in good time before the election, and we want to do it so that we know exactly where the world's at prior to the election. I mean, part of the issue here is that the world is moving at a particular pace, and we need to understand the circumstances as best we can as we put forward to the Australian people what our proposition would be over the next 3 years of government post the election in terms of getting to what needs to be the global ambition, which is our ambition of net zero emissions by 2050. The government are the ones who are governing now. Scott Morrison is governing now. It's for him to actually articulate what his mission is to start with, and then how he's going to get there.
And we are asking them that when they're in that chair. So that's fair enough. But I'm just interested in Labor's sort of guiding principles or guardrails. do you think it's incumbent on Labor not to say this will cost the economy a bit, but to sort of compensate industries? Is that the politics in this country, that you can't say, yes, this industry is going to be a bit worse off, that's what we have to do?
The guiding principle here is firstly to say what you seek to do, and we've made that clear. And we make it clear in terms of our ambition because it is what underpins the international accords to which Australia is now a party. And it's also important that as we move towards greater use of renewable energy, for example, that we are maximising the economic opportunity that's associated with that. That we're actually maximising the jobs that come with renewable energy,
and that's fine.
And that's a really important part of this as well. Now we will. We don't shy away from the fact that there are difficult decisions as you articulate a roadmap.
There will be effects on
make them
industries. Clear. I guess my question is, do you think you'll need to compensate those industries for the decision the federal government makes?
Well, all of that is matters that we will make very clear in terms of our.
But what's your view on that? Because you know both the climate policy but the politics in Australia. Do you think if you're going to have something more ambitious, you'll need to say, and we'll compensate it, so Australians aren't scared off it?
Well, I come back to the point that I made. You need a very clear ambition, which is the one that we've got. We don't want to be left behind the rest of the world, and we don't want to be left behind the rest of the world from an economic point of view. We need to be making sure that the employment opportunities that arise by virtue of, for example, taking up a greater use of renewable energy are opportunities that this country benefits from. That forms.
Does that mean there'll be winners and losers? Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is that there are opportunities here that we need to be making sure that we don't miss out on.
Right. But some industry will be hit harder.
But the world is moving to a position. We're not shying away from the fact that will be the ambition which underpins the policies that we take to the next election, and we will articulate those policies in good time.
But there's been a lot of discussion of this surely already. So have you formed a view on whether you need to win the argument? You need to compensate industries.
But I'm not we're going to go through our process and we're going to announce this in good time. I'm not about to ventilate that here today. We will make sure that we have all of that in place before we go to the next election. But we have been very clear about what we've been on about for a very long time.
The Nats seem to be saying, well, we could do it, but don't make the regions worse off. Is that a principle?
I don't know what the Nats are saying. I really don't. I mean, the Nats are all over the place.
Would you agree with that principle, though?
Look, the Nats, you can't get a coherent position from the National Party or from this government about whether they even commit to the proposition of net zero by 2050. I mean, you've got really important entities within regional Australia, like the National Farmers Federation, who see the importance of net zero emission by 2050 from the point of view of the agricultural sector. But you don't get any of that coherence in terms of anything that the National Party is saying.
We might know more soon.